Ladies and gentlemen, this is Urex and this is World War One, the Seminal Tragedy, the final act, extra history, part 4, with the channel extra credits. Yeah, this is I think the last video from World War One series of this. I'm loving this series so far because it talks about all the things that led to the war rather than talking about the war itself. So you don't see that quite often. So this is fun series because of that, and all the pieces just had to fall in the right places for this to happen. That's the most fun part about it. Like small thing here and there feels like stupid thing, but it just happened, and that basically led to a war. If some things here and there wouldn't have happened, the war could have been avoided. So this is something. I guess he's going to talk about here how in the end all the party just finally decided to mobilize and attack. So yeah. Remember people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe, check out the reaction, there's a link in the description, check out the cast of the playlists like History, All Sarcastic Production, Inter Student, CGP Grey, Tier Zoo. Yeah, let's watch this one.
The 24th of July, 1914. It's late at night. A group of haggard-looking men sit in a dim room in the ministry in Belgrade. One of them holds the Austrian ultimatum in his hands. They've spent the day debating how to reply. Defeated, they're about to give in to all demands. A notice slipped under the door. It says that the Russians have started to mobilize. They change their reply, and the final act begins. In their reply, the Serbians agree to 9 out of 10 Austrian demands. They only refuse to allow Austrian officials to have police powers within Serbia. But their reply is a masterstroke, an act of genius in the way it concludes. For at the end, it says that if the Austrians don't find their terms to be fair, the Serbians are more than willing to submit to the resolution of a conference. But if you'll remember, the Austrians hate conferences. They are always getting outvoted at those things. Well, no more, not this time. They are livid at the Serbian reply, but like always, they turn to their German allies for advice. The Kaiser is still at sea, so Austria's foreign minister Berthold goes to consult Bateman Holweg and Moltke, the head of the German army. They're apoplectic. They say, "What, you haven't declared war already? A month has gone by, get on with it. This isn't what we agreed to. We're losing the sympathies of the people of Europe." You see, after the assassination of the Archduke, public opinion in Europe weighed heavily against Serbia. It was politically impossible for anybody to support them then. But now a month has passed, and this reply, this meeting of most of the Austrian demands,
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I'm thinking. Obviously, that thing where sympathies are so it at the start, if they had declared war and suddenly start to attack them, yes, people would have been like, okay, we understand that since Arctic got shot, of course, aggression like that was inevitable, so they did that. But I don't think that would have stopped. I mean, Russia mobilizing and attacking them. But then again, Austria didn't really want it to annex Serbia, right? So, I don't know, maybe if they had mobilized earlier and just attacked at the time of Serbia, just point blank attack it, maybe it wouldn't have escalated to global war, maybe.
and this offer for mediation made the Serbs seem like the reasonable party. After all, what more could Austria want? So, with the rebukes of the Germans driving him, Berthold returns to Austria-Hungary and for the first time speaks with Konrad von Hötzendorf, the chief of staff of the Austrian army. He too is apoplectic. What, declare war? Are you kidding me? You needed to tell us weeks ago if that's what you wanted to do. The Austrian army won't be ready for war until the 14th of August, weeks from now. Plus, we don't even know who we're mobilizing against. You want us to prepare for war with Serbia? Yeah, not when Russia's mobilized against us, we aren't. Get us a guarantee of Russian neutrality, and then maybe we can talk about mobilizing against the Serbs. Despondent, pressured toward war by the...
I mean, yeah, you can't just basically walk in like, okay, we are at war, bring your troops. Like, really? You think that is that easy? If Russia is mobilizing and it's still in progress, obviously Austria needs time to mobilize too. You can't attack in two fronts like that.
Germans, told that Austria isn't ready by his own chief of staff, Berthold returns home and begins to think. As the hours grow later, he starts to convince himself. There's a way out of this. He starts to reason that declaring war isn't necessarily the same as being at war, and so maybe if he declares war now, he'll placate the Germans and be able to use that threat to get the Serbs to capitulate before he even needs the Austrian army to be ready to fight. Now, we can all see this for the desperate rationalization that it is. We've all at one time or another...
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, at the time it made sense to him, but seriously, playing gamble at the time like this, Europe has been war a lot of times. Every few decades is a major scale war. Now, in this case, Russia is involved, Germany is involved, and now obviously France is involved too, because they also said that we support it. So all of these parties are involved. Obviously, British are not gonna get left behind. They're gonna get involved too. So when the global powers or Europe is involved in something, yeah, let's play gamble. Let's just declare a war where I have no army.
Other gotten ourselves into an impossible situation and let ourselves believe in some wild, harebrained solution that'll surely fix everything.
Yeah.
Only when we do that, the fate of the world isn't usually hanging in a balance. And so, on the 28th of July, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, with Bertold all the while believing he's going to bring peace by declaring war. But that morning, the morning of the 28th, Kaiser Wilhelm II got back to Potsdam. That very morning, the Kaiser read the Serbian response to the Austrian ultimatum and uttered, "With this, every reason for war drops away." And here is one of the great tragedies of those frantic July days leading to the war. This man, Wilhelm II, for all his inadequacies, for all his failings, for once in his life steps up and tries to become the man he should be, the man who deserves to rule the most powerful nation in the world. And he comes so close. And yet, despite his best attempt, he's too late. The world doesn't reward his effort, things spiral into chaos, war comes, and his empire will fall. The Kaiser tries to open peace talks, perhaps even hold a conference, but the Austrians will have none of it. So he proposes a novel solution: halt in Belgrade. Belgrade, the Serbian capital, is just a few miles from the Austrian border. If the Austrian army occupies the capital, they can declare victory and save face while showing the rest of Europe that they don't plan to annex Serbia. And they can do it quickly enough to perhaps keep the Russians out of the war. But this proposal has to go through Bethmann, and Bethmann's in Berlin. Now get this, it's 1914, so as impossible as it seems, there was no telephone line between Berlin and Potsdam, so Bethmann can't reply directly. He's pretty skeptical of the halt in Belgrade plan, but instead of making the drive to Potsdam for clarification, he passes it along to German agents in Austria with the instructions not to press the Austrians too hard to adopt it. And he doesn't even mention that it comes from the Kaiser himself. Meanwhile,
Yeah, okay. Really? So Kaiser went on to the vacation, otherwise he could have stopped all this shit. Only if he had come back just a few days before. And damn, I mean, his own people, it's like, we have sympathy. Go to war right now. And Kaiser like, we don't need to go war. I mean, it feels like, he should... There's a, real miscommunication between Kaiser and his own people. I mean, he should have instructed his people more well, like in events like this, you don't just declare war or something like that, because it feels like real miscommunication there.
While in Russia, Sazonov gets reports of Austrians shelling Belgrade. These reports are false, of course. The Austrian army won't be ready to do anything until August 14th, but he has no way of knowing that. So he, one of the last men opposed to full Russian mobilization, lets the dam break and declares himself for a full mobilization of the Russian army. He and the Russian chief of staff...
Wait a minute, was that Serbians doing that to mobilize Russians so, Serbians would look stronger? By giving that kind of false news, Russian mobilizes full out, so now Serbians have more power. I guess Serbians did that, right?
Yanushkevich go to see the Tsar and convince him that the time has come. General mobilization is ordered. Night falls. It's 1 a.m. and the Tsar can't sleep. He sends a telegram to the Kaiser of Germany, and it reads thus: "Am glad you're back. In this serious moment, I appeal to you to help me. An ignoble war has been declared to a weak country. The indignation in Russia shared fully by me is enormous. I foresee that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me and be forced to take extreme measures which will lead to war. To try and avoid such a calamity as a European war, I beg you in the name of our old friendship to do what you can to stop your allies from going too far. Nicky." Now you have to remember that these two men were cousins. They were friends. All the avenues of diplomacy had failed. All the standard bureaucratic mechanisms of the state were driving them to war, so they reached out to one another as...
Yeah, see, that's the thing. So far, only thing I'm seeing is that failed of diplomacy, basically. Failure of massive diplomacy. Because this all should have been handled with diplomacy. That's what I'm thinking. Because all the major power who's going to get involved, they don't want the war. The issues with Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Serbia is a weak country compared to the, Austria-Hungary. Germany, Russia, France are powerful countries, and they'll be the main meat of the war. Germany attacking France, that trenches and shit, because somebody in Serbia got shot. This feels like this should have been avoided with great diplomacy, which failed. So, in just one sentence, if I'm going to say World War One started because of failed diplomacy, that's it.
Cousins and as friends to see if the two of them dealing directly person to person could avoid this war. And in a touch that could only come from these twilight days of empire, did they not refer to each other as Tsar or Kaiser. They don't even refer to each other as Wilhelm and Nicholas, but rather as Willie and Nicky. The Kaiser is awake too, and he responds. A flurry of telegrams get sent back and forth. At the end of these correspondences, Nicholas picks up the phone, calls Yanushkevich, and tells him to call off the general mobilization.
Damn, really?
Yanushkevich splutters and starts to reel off all the things that canceling mobilization means they're gonna have to do, but the Tsar says, cancel it, and hangs up the phone. On the morning of the 30th, Sazonov hears what the Tsar has done. He's shocked. He pulls in the head of the Duma, the Russian parliament, and the patriarch of the Orthodox Church, and they go in for a knockdown, drag-out meeting with the Tsar. The room is crowded, it's hot, talks are getting nowhere, and then Nicholas moves off alone, staring out the window at St. Petersburg, trying to think. After a few minutes of reflection, coming to no conclusion, a young man, an aide-de-camp, standing near the Tsar, says, "Majesty, we know how difficult it must be for you to decide." Without intention, these words cut. Nicholas had always been called a weak, indecisive, feckless leader, and he hated it. He wanted to shake off all those names people had been calling him for so many years. He wanted to show the world he wasn't some wishy-washy prince who couldn't make up his mind. And so, like that, with the words of some aide-de-camp whose name history has forgotten, Nicholas turns around and says, "I will sign the order." Back in Germany, Bateman's finally come around. They're starting.
So his insecurity basically is another piece that led to war. Otherwise, he already called off the mobilization. All he had to do is like, no, I said it, no mobilization is no mobilization. So, but now it's some I guess some aide basically said, this is, I know this is so difficult for you because you're a wimp. Obviously, he didn't mean that, but that's what the the Tsar heard, and he's like, oh, screw that, mobilization now.
To make progress with the Austrians on the halt in Belgrade plan. The British have even said that this plan has their support. But Berthold won't accept it. Can't accept it unless the Russians agree to halt their mobilization. And here we hit the catch-22 of the First World War. This is the age of the train, the period where logistics and timetables dominated military thinking. All around Europe, it was thought that if you could just get your army to the battlefield while the other guy's forces were still arriving, you'd crush them every time. You'd win without contest. And as we've seen with the Austrians, mobilization can take weeks. It is a Herculean task to coordinate and move the millions of men that made up a modern army. And if Russia acquiesces and has her army stand down, they will be impossibly behind. If they stop mobilization, and then Austria or Germany decide to attack, they'll have lost the war without even a fight. So Russia cannot stop mobilization. But if Russia mobilizes, that means Germany has to mobilize too or face the same dilemma. And now, with Germany mobilized, what can France do but mobilize themselves? After all, the Franco-Prussian War taught them a hard, bitter lesson about what happens when you get your army to the field too slowly, and they will not be making that mistake again. And so the dominoes start to fall. But there's one last attempt, one last try to stop that crushing chain of causality leading the world inexorably to war. Portales, the poor German diplomat playing a bit part in a tragedy that he has the desire but not the means to avert, has one last meeting with Sazonov. He says to Sazonov, call off the general mobilization. And Sazonov says no. Portales pleads, for God's sakes, there will be no winner in this war. If we fight, it'll be revolution. It will be the end of monarchy. It'll be the end of us both. Won't you please call off this madness? And Sazonov says no. Portales drops to his knees and says, if you do this, it will be slaughter. I beg of you, in the name of all that is right and decent, call off this mobilization. And Sazonov says no. Then Portales rises to his feet and takes...
Sazonov basically was one of the last guy who said no Russian mobilization until somebody said that, somebody shelling, a Serbian city, Belgrade, whatever, what he said. And that, broke him, like, okay, screw this, now Russian mobilization. That news was fake. So I guess that fake news alone drove him so hard that he's like, no, there has to be a Russian mobilization now. Look at that.
Takes a piece of paper from his pocket and says, in that case, sir, I have the honor to inform you that we're at war. He's still struggling to collect himself, saying, never thought I'd be leaving Russia like this. I don't know how I'll be able to pack. Sazonov kindly offers to send somebody to help gather his things. And a month later, 1 million men are dead.
Damn.
The Seminal catastrophe has begun.
Oh god, this is so effed up and seeing this. Some, really real bad diplomacy, some fake news is here and there. Oh god, this is so effed up. All the people died. Look at that. That sentence is so heavy. And then 1 million people died. Oh god. Damn. History tells us a lot of things, and one of the things that this series told me that, communication errors, chain of command errors, what Kaiser wants, what his people wants, lots of things can influence, events that could lead to something like this. I mean, seriously, Archduke got shot, in Serbia. It was between Austria, Hungary, and Serbia. Failed diplomacy involved major powers like Russia, France, eventually Britain, Germany, and millions of people died. World War II makes sense. World War II makes sense because of World War I understand. But still, if you just see World War II, it makes sense. A bad element rose up. He had a vision of the world that hurt entire world. So people had to band together to stop him. That makes sense. There is an evil guy at World War II. World War I is just bad diplomacy, miscommunication. It's just bad around. It really is sad. This is a seminal tragedy, isn't it? Alright, people, that was World War I, the seminal tragedy, final act. If you like prediction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the prediction. There's a link in the description. Check out the castle. Please check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time. Maybe Otto won Bismarck tomorrow. Yeah.